M.W. Harrison once said, "The waste of money cures itself, for soon there is no more to waste." Keep this in mind as we discuss today what most Americans are wondering about, whether this aid to Ukraine is starting to hit home right here, given the social issues we are dealing with. My name is Dr. David Waradu.
And my name is Dr. Ross Stewart.
And you are watching Geopolitics in Conflict.
Homelessness is not a new issue, but it is one that often doesn't receive a lot of attention. The number of Americans living without homes continues to rise at an alarming rate.
Rising housing costs and inflation are leading to more people living on the street. The Washington Post reports homeless shelters are seeing an increase in the number of people looking for a place to stay.
New York has been facing the lowest temperatures in decades, and also the highest number of homeless.
No government that I'm aware of has saved money by investing in homeless services through a housing-first approach.
The world is random, meaningless, chaos, or is it? How do some of the best, wealthiest, and most powerful people seem to know what's coming before it happens? Well, one way is that they create the circumstances in their favor, but the other is that they know how to read the world's stage and spot patterns and trends in key areas. They don't get lost in the overwhelm of endless information. They know what's important to pay attention to using their own formulas, and most importantly, they know where to put that information to actually make it usable. Would you like to be able to do the same thing? Well, we have a course that teaches you to do that exact same thing. It's called No Nonsense Politics. So if you want the leg up that some of the world's brightest have, as well as an online community of people who think for themselves just like you, check it out. Link in the description box below.
Good to see you, Ross.
It's good to see you too, David. It's good to be here today. $104 billion.
Where did it go?
What I can tell you is it did not go to the American people. It did not go to resolve the issues that we're facing right here at home that desperately need our help.
Well, that's for sure, because at some point, that's like a family, you know? When you just spend so much, at some point somebody in the family is gonna say, well, wait a minute, how much can we be spending here? Especially when you have other issues to deal with.
You know, this is bigger and bigger than you would ever think on the surface.
Yeah.
Like so many darn issues, there's so many ways to look at it, and it's always complicated. What we know, you go to the gas pump, and we've talked about this over and over again, and everyone knows this one.
Yeah.
The war in Ukraine is responsible for
the increase in oil prices, yeah. Well, given now that even some Western media now saying that OPEC is gonna increase production.
Liar,
it's a lie.
liar, liar.
It is a lie. There is no increase from the OPEC. And funny, I just read an article, not from here, from overseas, about the OPEC, stating that, no, as of today, there is no plan on increasing oil production. So it makes you just wonder. But to me, the way I look at it is the psychological impact of a statement like that. What will it do to an average Joe, an average Jane here in the US?
It demoralizes people. There's already this great feeling of we can't trust the government. Going, wow.
Yeah.
And we see what the American people really think of the Congress.
Yeah. Well, I don't trust the government.
Well, I don't either.
Even though I worked in Washington.
And a big section of the audience started chanting, blank you, Biden. And Obama couldn't stop them.
Yeah.
And you say, oh, this is a Democrat rally full of Democrat people, we think.
Yeah.
And that still went on. So we see major disaffection for the government. Yeah. And homelessness is on its way up.
Well, that's the problem with all this, because now we're seeing this rise. And just to bring it back to the issue we're going to be talking about today is, how much money can we send to Ukraine or to any other country? There are those who have been arguing, how much foreign aid can we be giving to other countries? Well, when you have issues right here at home, like homelessness is one of them. Well, I did find out some stats, Ross, the increase of homelessness in the US. We're looking at about, for example, 69,000 homeless people in LA County alone. In LA County alone.
That is outrageous.
Sacramento, which is the capital of Washington State, an increase of 67%. You look at also housing prices here in America, up by 17% from last year. You know, you put this into the context within the government spending, like I said, with the family. If you just to spend money, somebody within the family is going to say at some point, enough of this spending, because what it's going to lead to. And this is exactly what the government is doing.
I'm too emotional about some of these things because I've dealt with these kinds of people my entire career. And what we're seeing is families where father and mother eat 2 meals a day because they can't afford 3, so their children can have 3 meals a day. We see that there are 45 million supposedly poor people in this country, double that for the working poor that barely live paycheck to paycheck. Barely. And now they're skipping meals because they can't afford them.
Yeah.
And we say, $31 trillion in debt? And it's on its way up, and inflation is actually eating their lunch.
Yeah. Well, this is why some people now, with as you may know, the holiday here in the U.S. with Thanksgiving, you know, there are some people cannot afford certain things. You know, the Christmas holiday is coming. Still, people might not be able to afford certain things. I mean, you look no further than, for example, what's going on right now in England.
Oh my!
I mean, I just read an article yesterday, and I posted it on my Twitter account. If you want to check it out at @dwaralu on Twitter, if you want to follow me over there. And I kind of argued from the perspective of now you got the new clown PM Richie Sunak going to Ukraine. He already went and advocating for freedom and support for Ukraine, while the British people are dealing with now inflation, let alone his government, Sunak. Guess what they are planning on doing? Increasing taxes.
Oh, that really is a good idea.
Yeah. So
you want to suppress the economy some more? Really hurt people's ability to buy the essentials of life?
Yeah.
Increase their taxes. You know, I understand that Great Britain has sent only $4 billion worth of money to the Ukraine. It doesn't seem right. It seems to have spent more.
yeah, I don't know the exact number.
Well, that's the research I did.
Yeah.
Said the EU spent about 30 billion. The United States spent 104 billion, and Great Britain spent 4 billion. What that does is it takes money directly away from the British people.
Yeah.
They're going.
Yeah. Well, we have the same issue here at home. So we'll focus on our own country. I mean, I care less about the Brits, what they do and whatever. It's not my country. It's simple as it is.
They own it, and they're responsible for it.
Yeah, they want to live that way. So who gives them about what they? It's their country. They can do whatever. But for us here at home, when I am looking, for example, at the stats that I shared with you here, the 60% of the 69,000 homeless in LA County, you know, I'm gonna be concerned where my country here is headed towards, with homelessness on the rise. We shouldn't be for a rich country. You can't have this.
You know, a whole lot of people look down on the homeless, saying, well, you know, they're lazy or crazy or something else.
Yeah.
A lot of them are victims of the economy, because most of these people had homes once upon a time. They just fell on some hard time. They got laid off or whatever. And now they're living in desperate situations, and it's winter.
Yeah. And by the way, just if you happen to be an American watching this homelessness we're talking about, it's not just for the poor people. It's now trickling down to the middle class.
Which is shrinking.
Yeah. And usually if you know anything about how society is structured here in America, I always give this example. I remember I used to teach my students to understand the structure of American society. You got the 1% at the top, the billionaires and millionaires. You got the 1% at the bottom, the poor, they have nothing, and I sympathize with them. If it were up to me, those 1% at the bottom shouldn't pay any taxes whatsoever, because they don't have any.
Right.
Then what are we left with? We're left with the big chunk in the middle, which is the middle class, us.
Yeah.
Because we are middle class, we're average people, like everybody. Well, it's the middle class that's sustaining the American economy, believe it or not.
Completely, actually.
Yeah. And you start to wonder, okay, we are sending this money over and over and over, let alone when you find out where the money ends up. I'm sure you heard about FTX. Yeah.
Cryptocurrency.
Yeah, well, it's just the way this FTX was used as a mechanism by which to send money, turn it back into American Democratic Party. It's a shame for how a government became so complacent to this level of literally, what do they represent? But at the same time, I like to be fair and just. At the same time, it's also the people to blame also for being ill-informed about the issues. We all say, why is the government pointing fingers at the government? How about pointing fingers at ourselves by educating ourselves about the issues and understand?
That's what a course is all about.
Yes, that's why we decide to do it. We decide to do the course because we can only talk so much here on this. In the no-nonsense politics course, by the way, we have a link to it down below. If you feel like checking it out. But this is what we wanted to create, is the idea of you need not only to be aware of what the issues are and understanding what those issues are, but also to prepare and have a plan as to you're going to be moving forward, because things are going to change one way or another.
One way of looking at this is you are responsible for what happens to you in your life. And that means you have to understand, you have to know what's going on, understand it, and prepare as a responsible person.
Yeah, and this is where it becomes now, at one point, you're going to say enough is enough with this government spending. I know we are not just pointing fingers at the issues, we also have some solutions. And if you allow me to share just one or two, I'll be happy to do so. Well, first of all, you're going to have to cut your spending down. Plain and simple. You take it to the example of the family. What do? If you are spending more than you are earning, what do? You cut down on your spending.
Well, too many Americans have gone the route of having high credit card debt. Oh, that's just like the government. The difference is the government cannot go bankrupt without profoundly impacting the world economy.
Yeah. But at the same time, you asked the question, you as an average citizen, and that's by the way, might not apply just to us Americans, it might apply to you in whatever part of the world you are watching from. So I'm sure the same issue could be raised in Australia, the same issue could be raised
in Australia.
China, in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Canada, in France, you name it. So each country has its own circumstances per se. So for us in the US, as an American, I will be asking myself, at what point the government ought to stop this unlimited spending, and for what?
They're not doing it, and they're probably not going to do it unless they're voted out of office.
Yeah, but at the same time, if voting out of office and bringing the same just to someone else, then what's the point?
There's some crack in the foundation of this system.
That's why I've always said that the system is corrupted to the core. This is one course, by the way, we're going to be doing, and I will be doing this personally here, about how the government, US government, is structured from its infancy.
Oh.
It's fascinating if you only know how the beginning of America is reflected in today.
We face this, you and I face this all day, every day, 7 days a week. We're keeping current with what's going on. As I talk to people, it's like meaninglessness, hopelessness, and sometimes just despair. And the younger the person is, the more they experience it. And it's for real, and a lot of people are seeing it, a lot of people are talking about it. They have no solutions whatsoever.
Is that because they are out of options?
It's because they have no idea where to turn next to find meaning in their lives. They see the government is hopelessly corrupt. They see $2.3 trillion going to Afghanistan that could be used at home. They see, $104 billion going to the Ukraine. And they see the government constantly lying to them. And they see their leaders have no responsibility whatsoever, take no responsibility whatsoever for what's going on. And then it just goes on and on. The education system seems to be devoted to something other than giving kids a good education, making them responsible citizens. No wonder young people feel so much despair.
So that's a little bit damaging psychologically to the whole welfare of society as a whole. And I've been arguing this point, Ross, in all my writings before, whatever. I've been convinced for the last 15 years, believe it or not, that the US and Western hegemony is on its last leg.
Well, I think Saudi Arabia, Russia, India, and China, they pretty well put a nail in the coffin of that thing.
What way?
An alliance that's moved away from the petrodollar.
Oh yeah, they are going into that direction. And most likely, because it's not most likely, it is. It's because the world is changing.
Yeah.
And when you look at, for example, I just saw research yesterday from overseas again, not here in the US, is that you take the example of China. China is importing oil from Russia, which we all know, but at a 30% discount.
Oh my.
Yeah. And China, as a matter of fact, importing more oil from Russia this year than it did last year. But still, Saudi Arabia is the main oil exporter to China, which makes you wonder. It's not a wonder, it's common sense. Why it makes perfect sense for Saudis to join BRICS. So
I have an aside for you, David.
yeah.
Last week I was talking to a Russian friend of mine, a Russian national. Mm-hmm. And I said, you're just in Russia, what's the feeling about all of this? And they say, you Americans need to understand something. All Russians believe that the United States is dedicated to breaking up Russia into a multitude of countries. You're going, really? I said, yes. And we take a look at all the things that America does, and even their public statements about Russia, and they say, we want to do business with America, but we see them as dedicated to our absolute destruction. And we say, well, how come Russia reacts the way it does then? I'm not surprised. If that is the core belief, the meme of the Russian people, that the United States is an avowed enemy from the word go.
Yeah, well, that's why when you put these kind of issues within the perspective or the context of what's going on here in the US, socially speaking, now you are looking at a homelessness increase.
Yeah.
What's going to be next? What's going to be next? You know, this is how the breakdown of a society starts. This is the indicator. Remember, we always talk about trends?
Oh, yeah.
You know, you start to see now where the trends are headed towards, because we are contributing to that through our unlimited spending. And again, I am not objecting to assisting other people or helping if you are in a position to help. But at the same time, there comes time when you say enough is enough. You gotta have to draw a line somewhere. That's like with your own kid, for example. You're gonna help your kid the first time, right? Are you gonna be helping your kids every time? Because if you do, what are you teaching him or her?
To be crippled, to not take responsibility for their own life. They're not learning life's lessons, which are frequently painful, but necessary.
Necessary, you're right. And this is where I see this kind of unlimited spending to the country of Ukraine, when assuming that the help goes to the people, what it does not. It's not impacting people at all, because the money goes in a full circle and comes back to the US.
I was involved with this business circumstance where two of the people who were in charge of the company were relatively young. And I said, tell me a little bit about yourselves in a business-like way. And they said, well, we were born into wealth, and we actually believed that we were ordained to be wealthy, that we were given this blessing from on high. And going, what? They were paying me, so I didn't do that. But in my brain, I'm going, this is not a good sign. By the way, their company went down. I withdrew from the project and said, I'm not having any part of this. What we have is You take a look at the behavior of the people in the Congress. They have come to the same conclusions. We somehow are special and have been ordained from on high to be in these lofty positions of power. That means we don't have to pay attention to the reality that other people do. And you hear people coming out of Congress who aren't that way, and they say, that is exactly what it's like.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked about groupthink, we've talked about consensual validation, we've talked about, you get into that circumstance, and everyone's saying the same kinds of things that are not reality, and so we can spend $1.5 trillion more than we have when we're bringing in revenue. That is the formula for a disaster. Only if it hits the United States, it hits the entire world.
Yeah. And exactly this, now the increase in homelessness is an indication or the results of that. What's interesting is that there is not much reporting on it here in the US. There's no, when I say much reporting, I'm talking about creating the link between too much spending over in one direction and the increase of homelessness right here at home.
Right.
And again, this is just one example among many. And this is why you are now seeing the mood in the country. It started to be like, you know, are we ever gonna end this cycle of unlimited spending? For what? But again, if you have a society that is ill-informed, what do you expect?
When people feel powerless, what are they supposed to do? They don't have easy access to quality information that's believable. Think we can believe newspapers, main media? No, we can't.
Not anymore.
If we ever could, we certainly can't now.
Yeah.
And they're not finding leadership, credible leadership, that's saying anything that they can use. We're seeing a few people start to stand up and be very popular.
And of course, they are labeled as the enemy. What happened? You're a psychologist by training, right?
Oh, yeah.
What happened when people could not handle the truth? They don't want to hear the truth. Why are you labeling somebody as an enemy just because he or she is speaking the truth? What's triggered that in your opinion?
Well, I happen to know what that is. We are the accumulation of the stories we tell ourselves.
Okay.
You say, well, is that really? Yeah, it's true. Because we tell ourselves who we are based on our history. And we have stories we tell. And we hold certain beliefs. And anyone who contradicts those beliefs is actually personally threatening. And you're going to feel it in here someplace. And human beings, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not, are emotionally driven. Every decision has an emotional component to it. And so I was talking to somebody and I mentioned a particular former legislator from Hawaii, and he said, I hate her. She's just going, do you know anything about her? No, but I hate, going. I said, that's irrational. You don't even know anything. But you have these strong emotions, and you think your emotions are real, that they actually are a reflection of reality, when they are just what you're feeling at the moment. They're physical sensations, and every decision has an emotional component to it, and that emotion decides what you're going to do. Going, I thought my big brain did that. No, your big brain didn't do it. The emotion did it.
Interesting.
And then you say, well, okay, now I get it. People they seem so irrational until you look at what that underlying feeling is, and you say, well, that perfectly fits their stories. I don't know if I said that in too complicated a way for psychology, but that's what's actually going on.
Well, I'm just, on my own understanding I'm just perplexed by how much Americans are asleep. I mean, isn't that obvious where things are going? And yet most Americans are, I will use the term clueless. It's sad. It's very sad.
There's a whole big conversation about what people are really capable of. The majority of people are really not capable of processing information very well. They're never going to get it no matter how well they're trained. They don't have enough brain power to do it. As I say, I don't know if we want to dive into that here because it's so controversial.
Yeah.
But it's really the case.
Well, maybe we can talk about this one on the course.
We certainly can.
Yeah. Because that will be a good platform, I guess, because people will need to understand this kind of. So on the course, if you can just allocate time and just we do it for our members.
Well, I've done any number of presentations on this particular topic, and I'm really quite well versed in it.
Yeah, that will be great, Ross, because that's the contribution we can do and offer to our people, it's the knowledge we have.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, I mean, I always ask myself, and I kid you not, by the time I go to bed, I ask myself one question: what have I accomplished today? By the time I get up at 06 or 0500 hours, I ask myself, what is my mission for today? It's because you have to have a purpose in life. Otherwise, what's the point of it? What is the point of it?
I keep a journal, and the beginning of every day is, what are the priorities for me to accomplish today? Now, throughout the day, I make notes about what have I done.
Yeah.
And I now have hundreds and hundreds of days of these kind of notes in my computer.
Yeah.
And going, wow, is that a good guide?
Yeah, because the idea of helping people at least understand, break down the information in a way that they can relate to, they can understand. So for them to understand, especially again, if you happen to be an American, to understand why there is a rise in homelessness in America, you're going to have to understand the link to the excessive spending by the government. And the government spends money that doesn't belong to it. It's taxpayers' money.
It spends money that doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
It's worse than that.
Yeah. And let alone in our Constitution, by the way, FYI, in our Constitution, do you know that it was a clause there that is prepare people to hold the government accountable as far as the spending of their taxes? So it's not like we're just speaking out of thin air here. We're speaking based on, at least if we are to say we adhere to the Constitution, here is the proof.
Holding our legislators accountable is not insurrection.
Yeah.
We are to hold them accountable.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But boy, do they squeal out a lot when they are being held accountable.
Yeah. And to us, when you reach this level of spending, for what? Because what is the end game? You know, what do we American people getting out of this? You know, let alone, you know, you create the problem and all of a sudden you're blaming others for it. That just doesn't make any sense.
You know how I'm so involved in this concept of radical responsibility.
What
it's
is
a
that?
psychological.
Okay.
It's a psychological thing where you say, I am responsible for everything that happens in my life. Mm-hmm. In that, I get the consequence of anything that I do. You can say, well, you know, other people did it. You say, well, did they or didn't they? You put yourself in that circumstance.
Yeah.
You did nothing about it. And if you say radical responsibility, it's your way of gaining personal power in every circumstance. It means I have to do something if my life circumstance is going to change. No one's going to do it for me. The government certainly is not going to do it for me. And my family's not going to do it for me. Other people, I'm not going to get some great benefactor from someplace. It's all up to me to make the changes that I want to see in my life. Now, is it challenging to take on that position? You bet it's challenging.
I'm sure.
And yet it's the only way for people to be truly powerful. And it's the only way for people to have genuine meaning in their life because they've taken it on to run their life on their terms.
Interesting. Interesting stuff. Well, just anything to add, Ross, before we close this out? You know, well, just for you to know that things don't happen in a vacuum. The link between the excessive spending of the government and the increase in homelessness in America is not a mystery. We all know why. And homelessness, by the way, is just one example among many other social ills that we are now going through. And it's time for us to face that reality. So before we check out, make sure to click the like button if you like this video, you know, and help us out move forward. And as always, prepare yourself for a changing global order. Till next time. Bye-bye.